medically needy spend down threshold. And there's some definitions here to begin. SSDI, the Social Security Disability Insurance, and SSI, the Supplemental Security Income, are two federal assistance programs that provide financial help to people with disabilities. SSDI is tied to work history. SSI is not. SSI eligibility comes with automatic Medicaid coverage. SSDI does not. The medically needy program is for individuals and families whose income exceeds Medicaid requirements, which includes many SSDI recipients, but who have significant medical needs. In order to qualify for Medicaid, those in the medically needy program must reduce their income to the medically needy income limit, or the MNIL. That's currently $645 a month. To achieve this limit and gain Medicaid coverage, the individual or family can do three things. They can make a cash payment to the state. They can spend towards medical bills or obligations, or a combination of the two. The amount that individuals or families must expend is called the spend down, or incurement. Because Medicaid is the only health insurance available that will help meet their needs for routine and long-term assistance, such as daily help with personal care and other activities of daily living, these individuals have no choice but to spend down each and every month. Disabled individuals who receive SSI, which is currently $721 per month, do not have to spend down to receive Medicaid. SSI and SSDI both typically increase each year, but only SSI recipients get to use their increases for living expenses. And SSDI recipients' increase only means that they have to spend down a larger amount to qualify for Medicaid. Let's take an example. John, who has a spinal cord injury and uses personal assistance services, receives $1,500 per month from SSDI in 2014. In order for John to qualify for Medicaid to help with the expenses of his personal assistance services, John will need to spend down $855 every month in order to meet Medicaid eligibility criteria. Now, let's say that in 2015, SSDI recipients receive a 5% increase in their benefits. That would mean that John would be receiving $1,575 from SSDI every month. However, if the spend down limit does not adjust, John would now have to pay $930 per month in order to meet Medicaid eligibility criteria. He would not be able to use any of his SSDI increase to help pay for any of his living expenses. Here's the question. If elected, would you consider supporting legislation to adjust the Medicaid medically needy income spend down threshold annually to match the SSI amount so that individuals who receive SSDI are not penalized for having past work history when they require Medicaid services? Or what solution would you propose that would prevent the Medicaid spend down for SSDI recipients who are in need of Medicaid services from growing larger year after year? And we'll start down here with Lynn Helgard, and there's a microphone. Pass it down to Lynn, please. We have to turn it on.
Yes, I would support that. I'm all about giving people a hand up. I think another thing that we can do is also look at streamlining the programs so that they mirror each other. They're not so confusing for the general public or the people that need to use them. Sitting up here, I almost had blood shooting out of my eyes trying to figure out which one was which and which qualifies for what. And I can't imagine a family going into this situation and having to figure out these programs. So yes, I would support looking at that.
Willis Kearney, House District 98. I would agree to adjust so that no increased penalty would be incurred by individuals who were using SSDI. I think it's unfair. We make adjustments for other groups of people in terms of income and other obligations, and this is no different. We should be able to make that adjustment and not penalize folks for receiving larger SSDI payments.
And I just realized that I didn't give you the chance to introduce yourselves, which was something I was supposed to do as moderator, and I apologize for that. Lynn, would you give us a minute of your history and why you're running the race?
I'm Lynn Hilligard. I'm running for House District 96. The main reason that I'm running is I am the state coordinator, executive director for the Montana Transit Association. For the last 4 sessions, we have been trying to work and shore up funding for senior and individual with disability transportation. We have not been successful so far, but we have a bill sitting on the table, and I would like to introduce that so that we can start expanding services for those 2 communities. With the incoming veterans that we've got coming back that are disabled, the senior population that is expanding, I think it's really important that we make sure they get where they need to be.
As I said a minute ago, I'm Willis Kearney, House District 98. I taught high school here in Missoula for 30 years. I worked with students of all capacities, capabilities, and the like. I think one of the reasons I'm running is making sure we provide appropriate educational opportunities for all students here in Montana, whether it be kindergartners all the way through graduate students. And as a teacher who worked with a lot of special ed kids who came to my classroom, I do have a strong interest in how we prepare these kids for their future.
Yeah, if you would introduce yourself, and then we'll start the timing on the question answer after your introduction.
Okay.
Why don't make it more complicated than it already is?
That's an IOAB, isn't it? So, my name is Roger Seawald, and I'm running for House District 98 also. I've given this run some thought after the last legislative session when I saw the polarization, and I believe there's got to be people in the middle that want to work and get something done, and that's about where I believe I'm at, is in the middle. And I want to work with both sides. Well, I'm not making a campaign speech, I'm introducing myself. I want to work with both sides to get things done. I have an interest in education, in the university system, because both of my children went to the universities here in Montana. I have an interest in older adults, and since I'm one, and I have an interest in what things that we can do for veterans, and I'm not talking about their health care. I think that there's things that the state can look at programs for veterans to benefit them for what they've given us. So I retired from the Forest Service a few years ago after 35 years. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and that's me. Now my question. Okay. Yes, I would in fact raise it. As a matter of fact, I think that the SSDI should, at a minimum, okay, this is at a minimum, be raised to coincide with inflation from the time that they quit raising it, which is back to 2001, okay? And I would support legislation that would back it up to inflation rates from 2001.
So just to clarify a point, the SSDI does increase, but the spend down limit stays the same.
And what I meant was the spend down limit would increase with the rate of inflation. Okay? Thank you.
My My name's Kimberly Dudek. I am the current representative for House District 99, which is the northwestern corner of Missoula County. I'm running for re-election to House District 94, which is also the northwestern corner of Missoula County. My background is as an attorney. I've spent a lot of time prosecuting on behalf of the state and the county. I've also worked in doing that, working with people with disabilities and mental illness. I am also a registered nurse. I worked in that capacity with people with all varying abilities. And I have a master's in public health. I'm very concerned about the health of our communities and how we can work to improve those. And that's why I'm in the state legislature. I have 3 adorable little children, and I want to make our state and our nation better than it is now for their future. So now I'll answer the question. And I agree that we need to adjust the spend down limit. It seems to be ridiculous that we're penalizing people who have worked and not adjusting the spend down limit for them. So I agree that as we just heard, that it should be adjusted for inflation, and so that they do not have to continue to spend down limit, and it should be adjusted annually, so I would support that kind of legislation. In addition to that, I believe that our state needs to look at how we can provide more services to people, and not always looking at cutting services to have the smallest amount of money spent to help our disabled and our elderly populations. And serving on the Appropriations Committee, which is the committee that deals with the state's budget, too often I saw legislators who were willing to cut services, such as possibly $10,000 to bring a child's body home when the child died, when it was in foster care. They'd be willing to not spend that money, but at the same time would support tax cuts that would take millions of dollars out of our budget. And then they would not account for where that money would be cut from the budget. So I think we need to bring some common sense to our legislature. We need to look at what bills we're putting forth and how they're going to affect the real people that live in our state. So I would support bills that would help more services for people, as well as one that would adjust the rate annually. Thank you.
Just keep that up, good. Nancy, does you want to microphone?
Hi, I'm Nancy Wilson. I'm running for House District 95. I did serve in the last legislature for House District 97, and everything was redistricted. I will let you know that I did have to retire. I won't say have to, got to retire, because it was a complication in my retirement system that I had to retire after the session, just so that I could collect my retirement. But as we all know, the problem with Montana, and one of the reasons that I'm running, is that Montana's session is every other year, is very short. Bills are shoved through at a high rate. There's not really time for legislators to digest or to get things right. And these problems that you have listed here look like that is exactly what is happening, is we're not having enough time to look through bills or legislation to do things correctly. So then they come back the next time and get shoved through and not paid enough attention to. We need to correct our system and let government work. I'm actually running because I believe in government. I think we need government. I think government is how we serve each other. And that is an important piece of the puzzle. And I would like to go to the legislature to try and help people understand, not to say we want less government and more jobs. I want people to be able to say that government is good. Let's make it right. Let's make it serve people well. If something's not working, that doesn't mean it should go away. That means it should be changed. That means it needs to be fixed. So anyway, yes, I would absolutely help trying to get more funding. I don't know how anyone can live on that kind of budget, so thank you.
I'm Dick Haynes, and my political background is I served 3 terms in the House of Representatives and then 8 years on City Council. During those years on 3 sessions. And the first 2, I was on the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks subcommittee. And then I went to Doug Mood and I asked to be moved over to Health and Human Services because I thought it was more important. And so I put my last session there. I was on the Health and Human Services subcommittee. And while I was in the city council, I was the liaison from the city council to, what's your name up there? To Missoula Aging Services. And I found that a very rewarding thing to work with. Well, I didn't get to do as much as I wanted to. I tried to help those folks. So with that kind of a record, I'm saying I'm here to help folks out. I know how some of this works. I will say this, if I'm elected, I'm going to get, the day after the election's closed and I'm certified, I'm going to get a group of folks from your ranks, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about all the things that are needed, like are on this paper. And I'm dumbfounded there's so many things that need to be fixed. But get on the chalkboard, just list all those things and put some priorities on it. And then start putting the fundamentals of legislation together so we can go to the bill drafters and say, we want this in the bill. And some of that stuff will have to come through the House because it appropriates money, but I think we can make that work. Anyway, that's where I stand on all this. And yes, I would definitely support the increase in funding here. And I see some others in here that I think is disgraceful that the funding works the way it does. See if we can't do something about that.
My name is Cynthia Wolken, and I'm running for Senate District 48, which comprises mostly the old district that Senator Dave Wanzenreed represented, and he was termed out of his seat. So I'm running. I also served on City Council with Councilman Haynes, and it was a great experience. I was also appointed to the Human Rights Commission of Montana, where we adjudicate appeals on civil rights issues and enforce the Montana Human Rights Act. And one of the protected categories is, of course, age and disability. So civil rights, basic human dignity, those are some of the reasons why I'm running for the legislature. I think we need to strengthen our laws that protect the people in our community. As to the question, I agree with all of the other panelists that we need to reduce the spend down. I had somebody close to me that dealt with this issue, and it was very stressful every month because it basically imposes a deductible on your medical expenses, and you have a large deductible even though you have access to Medicaid. And I just think it wasn't fair, and I definitely don't support policies and programs that keep people mired in poverty. I think we need to allow people to have a basic comfort and be able to live with dignity in their own communities. And so I definitely support addressing this issue. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bill Gear. I'm the Democratic candidate for House District 97. I'm a retired Fish and Wildlife Agency Director, 40 years in Fish and Wildlife. I've been in Montana about 27 years. My political experiences, I've been on the Lowell Community Council for the past 5 years as a vice chair. And I was also a political appointee as a state agency director. My wife and I are heavily involved in volunteer activities. She's a retired nurse. We both volunteer for some of the aging services programs. We're the first night of making blankets for the children's shelter, Ronald McDonald House. We're also on the basic crew that runs the Lowell Food Bank. In that capacity, I have a chance to see fellow Montanans who come in on every month, twice a month in fact. And some are disabled, some are underemployed, many of them are seniors. They have low incomes, that's why they come into food bank. They do not have enough money to pay the bills. And even when you look at that medically determined income, that's not very much money to pay the bills if you have nothing else to pay. It's a very, very low income. And so when we require a high, in effect, deductible for the spend down, that is terrible limiting these people. And I can speak from personal experience. I have a daughter, she's now 46 years old, who's on SSDI. And for her to come down with a spend down would be just about impossible. She lives in another state. I also have other family members that are disabled. either mentally disabled or physically disabled, and I can see the stress it puts on them. So the short answer is yes, I will support a program or a fix in legislation where we can increase the amount of income that they don't have to count, so the spend out is less. I'm not sure what the best formula is because we do have, say, a session every 2 years. If we're looking at an annual fix, we have to come to grips with what that might be. Recognizing I have not been in the legislature yet, there may be some good ideas that would improve it beyond just a general statement to say I would support the annual increase of that required amount that they have to spend down to, so the spend down is less. Looking for other ideas that may improve the solution.
Hi everyone, I'm Representative Ellie Bowman Hill. It looks like I know quite a few of you in here, but if you don't know me yet, I've been in Missoula about 10 years. I was an attorney in Boise. I moved up here to take the job as the executive director of the Poverello Center. Many of you know what the POV is and what they do. That sort of catapulted me into the great injustice that I saw when dealing with the folks living on the margins and food insecurity, veterans issues, homeless families, into running for the legislature. I'm now entering my 3rd term of the Montana House of Representatives, going back to work here now as an attorney during our off season. I'm also the proud mom of Jackson. You saw him roll around. He's 11 months old, Evan who's 5, and Elliot who's at soccer practice right now who's 9. I just want to share, I serve on House Judiciary, but also House Health and Human Services. You heard Councilman Haynes talking a little bit about that. It's so incredibly powerful and important for the work that these questions you're going to hear today and the work that I know you care about. But it's also a lot of folks that put partisan politics and partisan rhetoric over common sense and over everyday Montanans, and it brings me to tears to talk about it, but it's true. I obviously would consider supporting legislation to adjust the Medicaid medically needy. I also actually am one of few Democrats that voted to override my own Governor Steve Bullock's veto last year of House Bill 12, and the effects that would have had on direct care workers that deal with the physically and mentally disabled. Some of you in the room here have contacted me about that. I'm just so passionate about the work that you guys do. It is why I got involved in politics. Since I do have a little bit of time, and since I think you do know that I would support the Medicaid medically needy income spend down, I just want to give my 2 cents about Medicaid expansion. It was the greatest tragedy I've seen in the last 2 sessions. 70,000 Montanans, because of really what amounted to a procedural gimmick. There was bipartisan support of it. Every single legislative lobbying group supported, including the Montana Chamber of Commerce. We're losing $1.8 million a day because people didn't like Obamacare. Chris Christie, the Republican governor of New Jersey, Jan Brewer, the Republican of Arizona, they supported it. It's ridiculous, and we have to fight like hell next session to make sure that it gets passed.
My name is Brad Cheetah. I'm the Republican candidate in House District 97. Some of you I know. Some of you probably know family members of mine. This to me is not an opportunity to campaign, it's an opportunity to talk about the issue here. One of the things that I think needs to be addressed regarding the first question. First of all, yes, I would take steps to address the inordinately difficult spend down that's going to be foisted upon folks. But I believe to a greater extent we need to have some ideas on how to accommodate that. Rather than just simply adjusting for inflation, I see no reason why we could not work with the federal program to potentially allow some sort of medical savings plan or account that would allow some of that money to be taken out of your budget for everyday items, but set aside for some specific purposes, perhaps medical. Because just simply to say I'm getting a $75 per month increase, but I only have to pay out $60 to me is still not a reasonable solution. There are potentially some other areas that could be identified where that money could be set aside and not counted against income and be allowed to be used by the recipient of SSDI. I have a niece who hasn't spoken in 25 years because she has cerebral palsy. She is one of those individuals that's going to be affected by this. I'm not impacted by that. I have a little sister who is her mom, who I think is not necessarily a saint because I've known her since she was born, but I think she has put up with an awful lot and knows the difficulties that are contained in a proposition of this nature. And I think there are some creative ways that could be implemented to allow that income, that any additional income, to be set aside or discounted and not counted against the income of the recipient, so that they still have access to it, that the access is used in an appropriate way. And I think oftentimes when government gets involved, they make decisions that potentially solve a problem that might create two. And I think what we need to do is look long and hard at what those additional outcomes might be. But I think there are some solutions. The short answer, yes, I think we need to allow for an inflationary discount, but do some other things that will help us not allow that income to be counted against the income of the recipients. Thank you.
We have one more person join us now.
You want to pass the microphone?
Hey everybody, I'm the late guy. My name is Nate McConnell. I'm running for House District 89 over in the University of Miller Creek, Hattie Canyon areas, southeast Missoula. I am an attorney and I practice law, and one of the areas I practice is in discrimination and civil rights, like Cynthia mentioned earlier. A lot of my cases appear before the Human Rights Bureau, and there was mention earlier of government potentially creating problems. The Montana Human Rights Bureau has a reason to be proud. They handle cases involving discrimination against people for basically things they can't help. And I've been in front of the HRB many times helping people with their claims against employers and landlords who discriminated against them, partly based on disabilities, physical and mental disabilities. And so that's an example of, in my view, of government serving the people. And so having reviewed the materials for today's forum, I think it's refreshing to hear a consensus that we're all supportive of adequate funding of these issues, and I stand with everybody here. And if everything in the legislature is this easily solved, I think we'll have a great session. So it's nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. It's interesting to see how many of the candidates have a personal experience or personal relationship with someone who are in these circumstances. I think it puts a whole different kind of understanding and commitment on your part when you have that experience. The next question pertains to special education, and we will answer starting with Nancy and this one, and then we're going to go that way. And here to talk to you about this issue is Mary Hall from the PLUK Parents Center. And we can just give you a mic here.
I am employed by PLUK Parent Center, which is Montana's parent center for families with disabilities. I'm also the parent of a young adult who has an autism spectrum disorder and who isn't working and doesn't receive services. And it's difficult. High school students who receive special education services must have transitioned to adulthood services, including in their individualized education programs by age 16. The goal of high school transition is to maximize adult independence by addressing areas of post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, and community participation. In other words, to gain the skills to live, work, and play as adults as independently as possible. Under federal special education law, IDEA, students can receive a free and appropriate public education, which is called FAPE, through age 21. The intent was that students who need it would receive about 5 years of transition service time to maximize adult independence and reduce the need and cost for public and private supports. However, in Montana, students age out of school at 18. Montana is the only state that does not require to make FAPE available to students who need it with disabilities until at least age 21. 20 states serve students until age 22 or beyond. The result is that after high school, Montana students with disabilities frequently lack the skills to move into post-secondary education, training, or work, and their days are spent sitting at home. And I have to share that when I walked in tonight, I was talking to someone here, and that was her story, and she shared the story of the other students who were Ben and her students, her son's classes, and that is exactly what had happened. Unfortunately, the state of Montana does not provide funding for students over the age of 18. With very few exceptions, districts refuse to serve students with disabilities beyond that age. However, Montana requires students to serve preschool students with disabilities, which is an unfunded mandate. Effective early intervention is critical and has a lifelong impact. With state funding, schools will be more able to provide more time and intense services to those preschoolers. Montana law can be aligned with IDEA to require districts to make FAPE available to students with disabilities through age 21 and to provide funding to serve those students. The more preparation for life that our students receive, the more productive and independent they will be as adults. This is especially true for individuals such as those with high-functioning autism spectrum disorders who do not qualify for adult services, yet do not have the skills to support themselves. And I would include that does also apply to students, individuals who do qualify for services, but they're on wait lists. So what solutions would you propose regarding the shortened educational opportunity for Montana students with disabilities?
Thank you. Nancy Wilson again, candidate for House District 95. This is just another sad, terrible state that we have put ourselves in. To be the only state that isn't taking advantage of this federal funding and helping people's lives, and it's because we've been just scraping off. In fact, currently you'll hear some discussion about a budget surplus in this state. There's no budget surplus. We have been robbing money from every program in the state and just barely scraping by and not funding things that are necessary in this state for so long. We have to change that. We have to start looking at government services as a necessity, above and beyond the desire to give money back to corporate boardrooms. So we really need to change that desire in this state. And yes, this is absolutely one of the items that needs to be funded. I also want to request and know that people from this group in particular, we're at the legislature, we're really good. We need good lobbyists. We obviously, each and every one of us can't know everything about everything. However, I do appreciate the education you're giving us today, but we don't know everything about everything. So we need you there. We need you telling us what is the desperate things that we need in this state. And, you know, this is our priority list, and we have to have it. So I appreciate what you did last time. I hope you'll do as well again this time. Thank you.
Nick Haynes, Senate District 49 again. My wife taught special education for a number of years, and so I've seen that on the outside, but still on the periphery. And I look at it as free and appropriate. I've seen a lot of special ed that, sure, there's some education effort there, but I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's been underfunded, or lots of times it's kind of like nobody cares about it. It's kind of something school district has to do. And I think we need to change that attitude. And when it says state of Montana does not provide funding for students over the age of 18, that's flabbergasted. You get these youngsters to that age and they're trying so hard to be part of society, and they've got so much going against them, and to say we're not going to do anything for them, I think is a crying shame. This seems fairly easy to change, although I recognize there'll be a lot of people who want to, and it'll take some hard work to get it through both the House and the Senate, but I think it can be done, and I would pledge to do my best on that. Thank you.
Thank you. My mom was also a special education teacher, so this issue is close to my heart. Your story made me sad, and then it made me really angry because it happens all over the state, and it's criminal, and it's ridiculous, and it's a lot of adjectives I think that we could all use. But I don't want to be back here after the next session saying the same thing. I feel like it's time to make this happen. There are people's, while we're debating this and while the legislature goes back and forth, I mean, there are children whose lives they're growing up through all of this, and there are children now that need the opportunity to have the education that they deserve. I think education is a fundamental human right, and I think that to provide this opportunity to teenagers, it's not just best for the individual, but it's best for society and for the community. And I think we just need to make it happen. I absolutely support it. Thank you.
Bill Deere, House District 97. I also agree that we should increase the age for training to the free and appropriate public education at age 21. And once again, I have a very close friend with an autistic daughter who's 17. She's coming on that 18-year-old cutoff. She doesn't have nearly the training necessary. And my wife and I find ourselves asking, what's going to be her future? Where is her role in the world when she's an adult? Do we forget about it? Do we institutionalize it? What does she do? We need to make Montana good for everybody. And I think, as Nancy said, having a budget surplus where we have programs like this that deserve funding, and say, well, I'd rather have a $50 refund in my taxes each year than I can forget about them. I can forget about these other people. Someone else will take care of them. Montana is for us. We're from Montana. We take care of our own. We take care of these. This needs to be funded. We need to do it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Ellie Hill again. I got two things. The first is I didn't mention I'm running unopposed. So that benefits you in a few ways because I'm going to just tell it like it is. No one's running against me. When I say I'm running unopposed, then the first way I want to answer this question is that the only way that we're going to see any change in this area is if you change the faces of your elected officials in the Capitol right now. That's the bottom line. We have a real opportunity to do that right now. The Montana Constitution allows for redistricting every 10 years. This is a redistricted year. You're seeing a lot of faces and a lot of contested partisan races in Missoula County because Missoula County could have a lot of new legislators coming to represent us. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is about solutions. I have the privilege to be working with Janice Nugent, who's sitting right there. I didn't know you were going to be here, Janice. Janice is one of the coolest ladies you can ever meet. Her and her husband, Jim Nugent, who's the city attorney here in Missoula. She's a speech therapist, language pathologist for the Missoula County Public Schools. She works a lot with special needs children, and her brother has Down syndrome. Janice came to me with a bill idea, and I'm going to need everybody in this room's help on it. Another benefit of being unopposed is I can put bill drafts in already, and I put one in that's similar to a bill that Senator Kim Gillen had introduced in the 2009 session called Brandon's Bill, Senate Bill 243. It would require insurance companies to provide coverage to folks that had autism. We're going to expand that to Down syndrome here in Montana. Annually, $50,000 for kids under 8, $20,000 for kids 9 to 18. I think that we can do it. There is bipartisan support in this area, and I can use your help. So thanks.
I'm Brad Sheehan, the Republican for District 97. The first term of free and appropriate education is free, and I think we have to understand that it's not free. It's coming from each and every one of us. Appropriate is more important. There are services that can be provided. Do I support additional education for students? Yes. simply because by 18, anyone who is seeking a higher education for the purposes of teaching, engineering, working in the medical field needs additional study. If we cut those off from funding who don't have the skills that they need to participate in life fully, we're doing them and us a disservice. But we have to look at what can we do and how much can we do. Yes, there is a surplus, a budget surplus, quote unquote, in Montana. But if we look at the fact that we still owe about $5 billion for retirement for teachers, public employees, we don't truly have a budget surplus. So we have to look very closely at what is important and what is necessary. Education is very important. I don't know anything that is more important than preparing people for life, giving them adequate skills. We need to expand the opportunities for people who need additional training. And one of the first comments I made when I spoke to a group of individuals was, I think we need to look at ways to fund students in education outside of the university system, to provide some sort of grant or scholarship for those who are seeking training in the trades, for example, or those who are seeking life skills. So I think there are myriad ways that we can step up to the plate to do this, but we need to identify which programs are first and foremost as far as their importance in this area. Thank you.
Kimberly Dudick again, running for House District 94. I just wanted to respond to something we just heard about this money that we still owe teachers in retirement. This last legislative session, we dealt with both the public employee retirement system as well as the teacher retirement system, and they are both sound now. They will amortize as they're supposed to, and we will not owe money. They're not going to fail. So it's misunderstandings like that cause us to cut services in the legislature when we shouldn't be. For example, we have, on September 19th of this year, Montana was said to be the state tax system was supposed to be fairest of them all. Of all the states, we have this tax system that's fairest, and yet when we start the legislature, you'll start to hear things like, we need to improve our tax system to make it more fair to businesses, or things like that. And unfortunately, what happens is that we then start cutting services to programs that help people with special education needs, or we make unfunded mandates. And those are problems. We shouldn't be the only state without law that makes the FAPE available to individuals until they're 21 years old. I think what we heard is that students, when they receive education, they're more productive and independent. They will be as adults. This impacts all of us, and it makes our society a better place for all of us to live. So we really need to look at how to do that and not be diverted by concerns that we need to improve our tax system and make cuts where they don't need to be made, and we need to restore funding where it has been cut. And this budget surplus we have should go back into the services that were cut before. Thank you.
Roger Sewell, District 98. When I was going through this material, I was really surprised to see this was the only state where it stopped at 18. It did not go to 21. I don't know the reasoning behind that, nor do I care what the reasoning behind it is. I think we need to look at making things equitable across this country in many ways, simply because the money is coming from the same place. We're talking about Medicaid dollars, we're talking about educational dollars. We need to be able to utilize those dollars to the best purposes for our citizens in this state. Additional education, and I don't know the cost at this point, I don't care what the costs are, but additional education for people with disabilities makes them more adaptive and self-assured when that education ends. And that's what we need to be looking at, is the future of the people that we have here in the state. And since I still have a little bit of time left, on your program, my phone number is wrong. Okay? And I've tried to correct it with the state for 7 months. I don't know who has 396-7275, and I don't know what answers they've been given. But mine is 396-7276.
Well, Security, House District 98. As a classroom teacher, 30 years here in Missoula, I have gone through full IDEA training. I sat through and participated in numerous individual education plans for special ed students. So when we talk about money, the first place we need to talk about is the federal government. The federal government passed IDEA, but you know what? They don't fund it to what it needs to be. So the first step is we need to put a lot of pressure on Washington to get with the program. So when any one of our congressional candidates comes to us this year and says, or you should ask the question, are we going to fully fund IDEA? Okay, that's point number one. Now, in terms of the state of Montana, I fully support closing the gap between 18 to 21. As a classroom teacher, I know how I had to go back and review some of the things from the summer months. That's with just regular students. But students with special needs, you know, the impact was greater. And this is why this gap is such a travesty to our students, especially with special needs. It's a really serious issue. Now, like I said, I would fund it. But one other thing I think we need to look at is as these students go from 18 to 21, once we institute this program, we need to make sure we bring private companies, private operations, like Opportunity Resources, into the picture to help the school district, help these students transition from this training into a full-time job. Thank you.
With Hildegard, House District 96. I really like your statement in your flyer here. The more preparation for life that our students receive, the more productive and independent they will be as adults. I think the other thing that you might have left out of this is by making them productive and independent, you give them purpose, you give them self-esteem, and it makes a huge difference. So yes, I fully support extending the age to 21, and believe it or not, as a Republican, this makes economic sense to me. We won't be warehousing these people, which we all know is very expensive. We also know that warehousing them gives them a very low quality of life. So to me, if we can make them independent, be able to live at home, get around their communities, perfect sense to me.
I'm Nate McConnell, HD 89. I don't know a ton about this, and so I thank everybody for helping educate me on this topic. One thing that struck me as I read the overview here was that there's an unfunded mandate, and that's kind of a theme that sounds familiar to me, unfortunately. And specifically what this says is that it's an unfunded mandate because the Montana law requires schools to serve preschoolers with disabilities. That needs to be corrected. We need to fund that. Anybody who knows anything about education knows that the earliest that you can start teaching these guys, the better off they're going to be, and as Len said, the better off we're all going to be, economically, socially, culturally, all across the board. So we need to fund this mandate. And secondly, I also support funding FAPE through at least age 21. I mean, that being the only state in the union that doesn't do that sounds to me like a pretty poor excuse, and we need to do better, and I think we can. Thanks.
Thank you all for answering that. Next, we will answer Brad Cheetah this way and Nate McConnell this way. And I'll ask this question. It's from the Aging Services, and it's about aging services funding. By 2025, Montana will rank 5th in the nation per capita for its population of older adults 65 or over. Many in this age group live between 100% and 200% of the poverty level, making them ineligible for Medicaid services, but not able to afford in-home services. During the last legislative session, the state's area agencies on aging, which includes the Missoula Aging Services, received a $1 million increase toward their services. This enabled them to sustain existing services, but only at current levels. The question is, what are your views on increasing the support during the upcoming session? Right.
First of all, before answering that question, one of the things that I would rather not see on this panel is addressing questions or issues others have brought up. So as far as the unfunded mandates or the situation regarding our retirement, Social Security, they tell us, is also fixed, but we all know that it's based upon monies that are going to be collected and going to be brought in by current workers to pay those who are receiving it. I don't want to see that situation occur here in the state of Montana where we keep kicking things down the road. At some point in time, we have to have the political courage to stand up and say, you know what, we have to address and deal with issues. As far as the aging services, I'm not very familiar with this particular issue. Probably I should be, but you know, as a full-time employee and as a father, grandfather, and having other priorities, you can't be 100% knowledgeable about everything. As far as increasing support, I believe we need to, but we need to ask ourselves the question, where does that money come from? Do we continue to increase taxes? Do we continue to put stress on an already tax-weary population? How do we do this without impacting those who are providing the financing for the services? And again, we need to look at allowing the public to be enabled by the government. It's not the role of government to take over those responsibilities. Before the government grew and before they took over a number of areas, assisting those with special needs or those who did not have the means to support or to take care of, let's say, a medical condition, there were private entities that did that. There needs to be much more collaboration between the private sector and the public sector so that those who are capable of providing services can do that. A friend of mine suffered an injury in a logging accident, was a modified quad, and his wife was told that they were going to bring somebody in the house to take care of him. She asked the question, why can I not be his caregiver? They allowed her to do that, and they spent about 20 years together. So I think it's important that we look at ways to allow and enable the private sector to do things that they're capable of doing with some assistance from the government.
Hi everyone, Ellie Hilligan. I basically disagree with almost everything you just said. For all intents and purposes, the state of Montana has a regressive tax system. In the state of Montana, that means that an individual that makes less than $40,000 a year pays more in taxes than someone who makes more than $400,000 a year. So yeah, I think they should pay their taxes. I think they should pay their fair share. I also agree with what Willis Curdy said earlier about the federal government. I know that we're here to talk about our local legislative races, but a lot of this funding comes at the federal level, and so pay real close attention to the United States Senate race and to what Steve Daines did or did not vote for, including shutting down our government and gutting a budget that included Meals on Wheels. The third thing I want to say is that, aging services got this increase, really not an increase. They kept things at the current levels, and they fought like hell to do it, and they barely got it. And I hear a lot of noise before these elections of people that support these, but when they get in that Capitol, they vote a different way. So let's just pay attention to who you vote for and follow what they really do. Thanks.
Bill Gear, House District 97. I am a little bit familiar with aging services. Having gone through for my Medicare training and whatnot, they're extremely valuable. They provide an incredible amount of public information just on those of us who are not disabled, and which is valuable. I just think about what they do for folks who are not as fortunate, do have a disability, or low income, and I think the services are invaluable to lots of people. The question I have, though, is I would like to ask is, they're funded at the current level. Well, I'd like to know what the expected demand is over the next several years. What would be a likely increase? I don't have an answer for that. Like Brad, I don't have the experience here. I have a good feeling toward the agency. I see the value they provide. I'm sympathetic to providing what they need to continue to provide that necessary support and service to all of us when we get older. But I also know they get some level of donation support. I know when I took my Medicare class, they said, you know, this is free, but if you want to write a check, that's good too. So we wrote a check. I've told other people about them that write a check. I don't know if that's substantial. It's probably not all that substantial. But that gets, I think there is a level of support that some people are willing to give. There's probably not a whole lot, but we ought to encourage that. I would support increased support, but I do think we have to answer the question, what is the expected rise in benefits that we see with the growing population over the next several years? So we have a pretty good idea of what we're getting into.
Thanks. Cynthia Olgan, Senate District 48. I definitely support the increase. I think a lot of us who are familiar with the social services arena and jargon understand that 200% sounds like a lot, but 200% of poverty level is, you know, a little bit more than nothing. So, I mean, yes, I absolutely agree that turning 65 shouldn't be, you know, a sentence for living the rest of your life in dire poverty. It's something that we need to address and that we need to address right now at the community level and really support the home healthcare industry. There's a movement across Montana right now to value these workers in the way that they should be valued for the really important work that they do. So I support both of those things. Thank you.
Nick Haynes again. I would remind, probably not you folks here, but other people understand, 200% of nothing is still nothing. But I think we need to do something. I don't think I could not support this. One of my best friends sitting out here in the audience, and I think she's tough to live with if I didn't. And I've come over with her to work on the committees from the legislature to make some of these things happen. I want to tell you a story about some of the things we're up against. These kinds of bills typically are the cat and dog bills. In other words, they're the bills that come down through appropriations after the regular budget has been solidified. And some really get massacred once they are brought into the appropriations committee. To give you an example of that, this isn't exactly helping for health care. Remember one bill where we were trying to do something, there's something like 6,000 single mothers in the state. And we were trying to put a bill together to increase what the state was helping them out. And we got that passed. I voted for it. I came back to the House floor and one of my comrades there said, well, you really voted against your principles, didn't you? I said, no, I didn't vote against my principles, but I probably voted against yours. And that's the problem we have with some of this. Some of these people see this as extraneous money that shouldn't be spent there. So once we get some of the appropriation out of the way, we need to have a real screaming mass in every one of those committee meetings that tells people we need this money. So I will do the best I can. Thank you.
Nancy Wilson, candidate House District 95. Definitely, this is one of our biggest issues that are going to be facing this state is an aging population. When I was hitting the doors out at Target Range the last time, I was seeing so many homes that had ramps up to the door that you could tell no one had been able to be outside for a long time. You know, people are still trying to live in their homes way outside of town. They're unable to drive anymore. We need to help people stay at home and help people stay at home as comfortably as possible. Transportation was my past employment, and I understand that we really need to invest in transportation to help people stay at home. I know my mother, shortly before she died, couldn't drive. She couldn't get out of her home. She was desperate to get somewhere. And in Helena, the only transportation they have, you have to call 2 days ahead of time and then hope you get on a list to maybe get a ride to the grocery store. How many of us think 2 days ahead of time about what we need at the grocery store? I certainly don't. And I know my mom didn't have the patience to do that. So we need to work on those issues and we need to fund them. And absolutely, this needs to be permanent funding, but we also need to know from you all, what is the number you need? And what is the number you need me to, all of us, to fight for? And we'll do it. Senior citizens are growing in this state. And we really do need to get with it and do it right. So, or we're gonna just have a lot of problems. So I hope that, and I know you will get it, and you've already given us as much information as you can here, and we're looking forward to more. So thank you.
Nate McConnell, HD 89.
It sounds like the question to me, sounds like, are we going to make adjustments for aging services that reflect the real world, right? We make changes to funding all the time that reflect things like inflation, higher costs of fuel, higher costs of food, all that stuff. And it makes sense to me that you would make a similar adjustment for something as important as aging services, something that allows people to stay in their homes, gives them the dignity, keeps the pressure off of facility-based care, those sorts of things. And I think that, you know, I would reflect the vast majority of the constituents that I'm going to serve by supporting such an increase. So,
Lynn Hilligard, House District 96. My day job has me working with a lot of the councils on aging and area on agings in the surrounding 5 counties. So I see firsthand what the cuts did to those agencies. But I think rather than just coming back and looking at new funding, I think it would be worth our time because I hear this from a lot of people that receive these benefits. I need to use 2 programs. My caseworker tells me I've got to take all of them. I think if we allow people to have a menu where they can select the benefits that help them, again, the hand up, not just the hand out, that we would find what services people really want, really need. That would be the best way to say means test those programs so that we're not funding programs that people don't need. A matter of fact, a good example is in Mineral County. They struggle with their respite care. Nobody's signing up for respite care, but yet they have other programs in the county that aren't funded well and they can't meet people's needs. So I think rather than having an all of the above with your benefits, we should look at that and give them the menu. The other thing I probably need to bring up is it was Miss Wilson that tanked our billing committee that would have funded the transportation for adults with disabilities and the seniors last session. So you might want to look at your candidates and their voting records.
so much for my kumbaya moment.
Willis Curry, House District 98. We are going to see a significant impact in the future. We need to be able to respond to increasing budgets for Meals on Wheels, in-home health care is less expensive. It's something we really need to focus on, and we need to make sure that aging services doesn't have to go ask to be included in the budget every 2 years, but they are in the budget every 2 years.
Well, I don't have a voting record, so I have a clean slate. I see Susan stood up back there, and I support aging services for several reasons. I volunteered for them, and I see what they do, and my wife works there. So, I mean, I think that, you know, as a society, we need to assist the aging population of Montana to maintain their independence and dignity. That's what we need to look at first. What that costs to do that, I don't know, okay? But I do know that Missoula Aging Services, along with other area aging services, want people to be able to stay at home, okay? That's better for the people. That's much, much better for them. It's cheaper in the long run. So we need to figure out exactly what is needed and how to take care of that. But I do support the aging services and the programs.
Kimberly Duda for House District 94. I do support aging services. I fought for money for aging services and for health and human services, social services in general. And I would support increasing the service levels. It seems ridiculous to not increase it with inflation, but only keep it at current levels. The cost of everything from gasoline to milk to beef increases, so it doesn't make sense to not also increase the money that's given. As far as what our state looks like, we don't have a sales tax, as all of us know, and that's great for us. But then we have to look at how we get money. And I serve on the Appropriations Committee and also the State Finance Committee. That is a statutory committee that meets year-round. And we've been looking at how we better approximate what it costs our state to run and where we should start our state budgets at. I requested that our fiscal division in the legislature look at how they're saying what our budget is supposed to be when we start the legislative session and what is most fair. So we're looking at how to make that more accurate so we accurately reflect what it costs to run state government. We have an aging population that will increase by 43% by 2013. Over 30% of the population will be over 60. And we have to figure out how to keep people in their homes, people who have worked hard all their lives in Montana, and we need to figure out what services they need, and we need to do that by providing funding. Our tax system is fair. It's spread out between corporate and individual income tax, as well as another fifth on tobacco and gasoline tax, and then another fifth on stable sources such as licenses, alcohol sales, and operating licenses, as well as oil and gas production. So only about 3/5 of our actual tax burden is borne by individuals and income tax and corporate taxes. So we have a pretty wide distribution of our tax burden in our state, unless we want to start a sales tax, which I haven't heard anybody want to do, and I'm definitely not for that. But then we need to look at how we can adjust the tax revenue, such as the oil and gas production, and do away with the oil and gas tax holiday where we lose millions of dollars every year.
Thank you.